There is a kind of defeat that leaves no visible scars, but consumes a man from within. It happens when he gives up his strength, his clarity, his direction in exchange for conditional affection, for a love that was never his to begin with. How many of you, gentlemen, did everything right, loyal, present, loving, and still were discarded, betrayed, or ignored, as if you never mattered? It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't your fault. It was ignorance. You didn't know the rules of the game. This video will tear off that veil and show you exactly why most men live trapped in an illusion. We are going to combine the surgical coldness of Arthur Schopenhauer with the relentless discipline of classical Stoicism. The result? Awakening. But attention, this content is not for the weak, not for those who still believe in fairy tales. It is for men willing to rebuild their minds, their lives, and their identities based on truth. So, before we begin, do what men of action do. Subscribe to the channel, comment below, and stay until the end, because what you're about to discover could be the turning point between continuing to be manipulated or finally becoming the master of your own destiny. Let's begin. Part 1. The illusion of love and the deception of nature. Gentlemen, most men live like sleepwalkers. They walk through life with empty smiles and hope rooted in barren soil. They believe love is salvation, that romance is the pinnacle of human experience. They place the feminine figure at the center of their emotional universe. They don't understand they are stepping into traps, while smiling. Arthur Schopenhauer was among the first to have the courage to say out loud what most fear even to think. Love is a trick of nature, a biological illusion whose only purpose is reproduction, not happiness, not fulfillment, and certainly not emotional justice. And when you hear this, your first impulse may be to resist, to get angry, to call it exaggeration. But here is where Stoicism enters, not to deny that reality, but to look it in the eye. Marcus Aurelius said, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing." And what is that wrestling if not the daily confrontation with truths as hard as this? Just as Schopenhauer tore away the veil of romanticism, Stoicism teaches us to observe what is, not what we wish it to be. Love, as sold by society, is theater. You walk in thinking it's a feast and end up cleaning the table after the show. And this doesn't happen because women are bad. It happens because nature is cold, calculated, and impartial. Epictetus warned us, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgment about things. The idea that love is pure and eternal, that's just that, an idea, an unchecked expectation. Schopenhauer crushes it. The Stoics confirm it. Peace only comes when you stop resisting reality. The question every man should ask himself is, how many times have you destroyed yourself for refusing to accept what was always right in front of your eyes? And it doesn't stop there. When a man believes that his completeness comes from the outside, from the right woman, the perfect relationship, the ideal moment, he becomes a slave to an ideal that never existed. It's like walking toward a sunset that recedes with every step. The Stoics called this attachment to fantasies, a fundamental error of the mind that flees the present. Schopenhauer not only exposes this self-deception, he shows you the price: frustration, dependence, and loss of self. The great irony is that in trying to escape loneliness, the modern man gets closer to it, because he didn't build himself before seeking the other. Marcus Aurelius taught, tranquility comes when a man is sufficient unto himself. If you depend on feminine validation to feel like you matter, you've already lost, even before the game began. The illusion of love as salvation is poison disguised as a remedy, and unless you recognize it, you will always be a prisoner, waiting for a relief that will never come. Freedom begins with a decision, to break from the narratives that weaken you. Love can be part of your life, but it should never be the center. The true Stoic doesn't reject love. He understands it, observes it, but never idolizes it. He knows that every time he kneels before an emotion, he surrenders his reason. And when reason falls, a man ceases to be the master of himself. Part 2. The tragedy of possession and the invisible game of desire. Few understand what happens after attaining what they so deeply desired. Schopenhauer called it the tragedy of possession. Human desire, once satisfied, dissolves like smoke. The woman who yesterday was a goddess today becomes ordinary, and the opposite happens too. For her, The man who was once magnetic and challenging becomes predictable and boring. Marcus Aurelius understood this with Stoic precision. What is beautiful? That which is in harmony with its own nature. But what if the nature of feminine desire isn't the same as ours? What if it's built to admire not affection, but perceived superiority? The man who understands this stops being an emotional player and becomes an existential strategist. He understands that attraction often disappears when mystery vanishes, and not because of malice, but because of instinct. Schopenhauer wrote, "A woman always desires what lies beyond her reach. Desire grows with difficulty." This will never be told to you by modern relationship gurus, but the Stoics always knew. What comes easy loses value. The man who gives everything away, who kneels emotionally hoping to be chosen, erases himself. Schopenhauer made it clear. Feminine emotion lives in the act of conquest, not in preserving what has already been conquered. This echoes Seneca, who taught, "Pleasure is not in possession, but in continuing to be worthy of what you possess." In the end, gentlemen, possession is not the end of the game. It's the beginning of decline. If you want to maintain respect, desire, and admiration, you must understand. The posture of conquest never ends, because the moment you become a possession, you become a burden. And this tragedy isn't limited to love. It extends to every area where a man becomes complacent after conquering something: his job title, his physical condition, his financial stability. Just as female desire dies in predictability, the human spirit withers in stagnation. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you stop evolving, you stop being interesting, to her and to yourself. The man who understands the cycle of desire knows. The secret is not to possess, but to keep becoming. Live with continuous purpose, deliberate action, daily discipline. Epictetus taught, we must train like athletes, not to impress, but to maintain the shape of the soul. And in relationships, the best way to keep feminine desire alive is to continue being a challenge, not dirty games, not manipulation, but unshakable presence. A man whose mission doesn't end with conquest. A man who doesn't settle, because he's understood that attraction lives in what is still being built. Therefore, gentlemen, the mistake isn't conquering. The mistake is ceasing to be worthy after the conquest, believing there's a finish line in a world where everything is movement. The woman flows with life. She tests, explores, feels. If you stop, she will continue, and not out of malice, but out of nature. It's up to you to decide. Will you be an anchor or a current, a weight or a direction? Part 3, reality is not fair, but it's justifiable. This may be the hardest truth to accept. Nature doesn't care about your emotional justice. You can be faithful, hardworking, loving, and honest, and still be replaced, betrayed, or rejected. Schopenhauer understood this clearly. A woman doesn't love based on logic, but based on perceived utility. And that utility is always tied to status, strength, security, and dominance. Many men confuse this with evil, but Stoicism shows us another path. Observe nature without resentment. Epictetus said, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen the way it happens, and you will be happy." In other words, if she left you, why did you stop growing, leading, being admirable? It's not cruelty. It's a natural response. You lost value in the biological game, and the game continues, with or without you. This is where many collapse. They fill with hatred, blame women, blame society, blame feminism. Pointless, irrelevant. The only thing that matters is understanding. You cannot control nature, but you can control your response to it. Seneca reminds us, it's not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It's because we do not dare that things are difficult. If you have the courage to see truth, without romanticism, without self-deception, without victimhood, you are already ahead of 90% of men. And more importantly, reality does not bend to your will, nor should it, because it is in the resistance that the Stoic is forged. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily reminders of life's harshness, not out of pessimism, but out of strength. The man who begs for justice from an unjust world is still a child. The mature man acts even when the game isn't fair. Schopenhauer understood this perfectly. If the game is unequal, the answer isn't complaint. It's strategy. And Stoicism teaches you exactly that. Adjust your vision. Master your reaction. Improve your position. Stop asking for fairness. Become indispensable. Nature does not reward the just. It rewards the useful, the resilient, the disciplined. The man who, even in the face of disappointment, does not stop. Because stopping is surrendering to helplessness. Moving forward is rising above it. Epictetus said, "The true philosopher doesn't seek a perfect world. He seeks to be unbreakable in an imperfect one." And that's what is within your reach, not to change the rules, but to play with mastery. Be the man who, even after rejection, grows. Even after betrayal, evolves. Even after loss, refines himself. Reality was never fair, but it's always moldable in the hands of one who refuses to give up. Part 4. From the man who begs to the man who inspires. Gentlemen, the man who still believes devotion is the path to love, is lost. He's become an emotional servant, a beggar for affection, waiting to be approved. Schopenhauer explains it clearly. A woman doesn't want a servant. She wants a man who inspires respect, even a certain reverent fear, a man she looks at and thinks, "This man doesn't need me, but still chooses me." Even as emperor, Marcus Aurelius understood this dynamic perfectly. The best revenge is to be unlike those who harmed you. The man who was betrayed, replaced, ignored, he doesn't need to shout. He doesn't need to complain. He doesn't need revenge. He only needs to evolve, in silence, in strength, in purpose. The true Stoic doesn't compete for attention. He lives so aligned with his essence that attention becomes inevitable. When Epictetus said, "If you want to be loved, love yourself more deeply," he wasn't preaching selfishness. He was declaring an unshakable principle. The foundation of all attraction is inner sovereignty. The man who begs for love reveals lack. The man who inspires love radiates strength. And that strength, gentlemen, is not a shout. It is presence. A presence that manifests in the silent decisions you make every day, when you train even without motivation, when you study when no one is watching, when you build something bigger than your immediate desire, you become magnetic. A woman does not respect what is needy. She respects what is complete. Seneca said, "The soul that masters itself will never be mastered by another." And here's where most men fail. They think they must give everything to receive love. But love isn't bought with sacrifice. It's cultivated with value. The Stoic man understands this. He doesn't offer himself. He imposes himself, not from arrogance, but from the solidity of one who has already built his foundation. Want to attract? Be rare. Want to be respected? Be firm. Want to inspire? Be the example. There's no greater power than a man who doesn't need applause to keep marching forward. The woman who's worth it will be drawn to a man who lives with purpose, not a man who begs for a role in her story. And when she arrives, she'll know, this is not a man hoping to be chosen. This is a man who chooses. Part 5. Transcending the game beyond the search for approval. In the end, gentlemen, the greatest lie men buy is believing that female validation is life's grand prize. Schopenhauer warned, that's the trap. The real reward is not to be desired, it's to be free. Stoicism hands you that key with total clarity. Happiness, Epictetus said, is found in wanting as little as possible of what is beyond our control. You can't control anyone's heart. You can't control what someone feels or stops feeling. But you can build a life so full, so rich in purpose, that love ceases to be an obsession and becomes simply a consequence. That's how the great Stoics lived. They didn't get lost in passions. They didn't kneel for affection. They built inner empires, and for that, they were respected, even by the most demanding women. If you've made it this far, gentlemen, you've already taken a step that most men will never take, to face the truth without masks, without filters, without mercy. Today you've learned what Schopenhauer dared to say, and what modern men still refuse to accept. Love, as it was sold to you, is a trick, a biological illusion, a survival mechanism of the species, not a path to fulfillment. You've understood. The woman is not your enemy. She's just a piece in a larger game, programmed by nature to select the best possible companion. And in that game, emotion never outweighs utility. With Schopenhauer, you saw the hidden drama behind the tragedy of possession, the moment when conquest turns to indifference. You discovered why the man who gives too much, who makes the woman his center, inevitably loses her. Because attraction lives in the challenge, not in submission. You understood that nature isn't fair, but it is logical. That's why expecting recognition for what you deserve is childish. What matters isn't how much you love, but how much you are worth. And that worth isn't declared, it's perceived. The moment you stop growing, stop leading, stop inspiring, you become disposable. Not because of malice, but because of survival. But the Stoics taught us something that changes everything. You can't control the world, but you can control yourself. And that's where the script flips. In Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca we saw, the real power isn't in external approval, it's in self-mastery. The man who doesn't need to be loved is the man who generates the most love. Because he is rare, because he is complete, because he has become what everyone desires, but few have the strength to be. You now understand. It's useless to beg for love. You must inspire respect. And respect only comes from purpose, from a life aligned with principles. And perhaps the hardest and most liberating lesson of this entire video is this. The woman was not made to be your world. You were made to build your world, and let her decide if she's worthy of entering it. Everything we talked about today, gentlemen, converges in one point: transformation. From here, you have two paths. Return to your old life, empty, lost, revolving around unstable affections. Or begin your reconstruction as a stoic man, solid, complete, a man who doesn't depend, who doesn't beg, who doesn't live at the mercy of biology or female approval, a man who governs his instincts with reason, who builds his freedom with choices, a man who lives with such powerful presence that the woman looks at him, admires him, and understands. He doesn't need me, but if I'm not strong, I will lose him. That is the man you were born to be, and the Stoic arsenal exists to remind you. So now, before you go, do what men of action do. Like this video to show you're no longer a sleepwalker. Comment below with a phrase that will become your new code of conduct. Subscribe to the channel because this is just the beginning of a much greater journey. And watch the next video already appearing on your screen, because there we continue this mission of reconstruction. A mission that few dare to accept. But that transforms those who commit. You are no longer a spectator. You are the protagonist. The choice is yours. We'll see you in the next video.